Hello, everyone, and welcome to Textilers. Okay, today we are beginning another fresh, session of our learning. This particularly is our intermediate class. So, for those of us that have been with us from the beginning, we started with the fundamentals, which we focused our training on the AZ 900, to understand the basics concept of cloud computing as well as Azure. Now we're moving to the intermediate where we'll be um, using the AZ 104 guideline. Okay, so if you're just joining us, so welcome to Textilers. My name is Oluwatosin Anishere. A consultant at Havana Ireland. A Microsoft certified trainer, also a mentor and no, a co-chair at Textilers. Okay, I specialize in Microsoft Azure and Microsoft 365, and I have over 10 years experience in this field. Okay, so the house rules are basically if you need to ask a question, you can use the uh, raise your hand icon on Teams. And yes, you can go ahead to unmute to ask question. But while the training is going on, it would be nice for us to, mute our buttons such that we do not distract others. Also, you can use the chat room to put down your question, and there we can see it and answer it at the end. Of course, there'll be room for questions. When that time comes, I'll all let us know. Okay, so like I said, we are delving into the training for AZ 104, and that's what we'll be using. Now, about this particular course, this course is focused for intermediate level, and basically, we are going to be learning how to manage, Azure subscription, securing identities, administering the infrastructure, configuring VMs. We'll be connecting Azure as well as our on-premises environment. We're going to be looking at networking in terms of how to manage network traffic. We're going to look at storage solutions, which means we'll be implementing storage. We'll be creating VMs. I know we did that at the beginners level, the AZ 900, but here we'll be going at scale, scaling VMs. We'll implement web apps, containers, backup, a little more advanced of the AZ 900 that we are familiar with. Now, who is this course meant for? Basically, the AZ 104 course is focused out Azure administrator. Okay, the people who are going to be managing cloud services, that is going to cut across networking, compute, storage. These are the people that this course is for. Now, these administrators are going to be taking end users requests from cloud. They are the ones that will make recommendations to services. They're going to also be doing more of implementation and configuration. And of course, they would make use of the Azure portal a lot, to get things done. Now, this course actually have a prerequisite, and why I'm mentioning that is because we are going a little bit high level from what it was with AZ 900. So there is a need. It's really a requirement for us to understand the on-premises. So for those of us that have been following us through from the previous class, you shouldn't have a problem. But if you're new here, I would encourage us, to in our spare time maybe refer to our other videos where we've taken the AZ 900 class before, because there's a need for us to understand the on-premises, the networking, the VMs. There's also a need to have an understanding of network configuration, things that has to do with virtual private network, that's the VPN, things around firewall, things about around DNS, TCP/IP. There's a need to have, even if it's the basic understanding. Also, there's a need for um, those people that wants to join this course to have the understanding of AD, that's the on-premises typical traditional AD concept, things around users, groups, and access control. So this experience would help, in understanding more what we will be doing in Easy Wonderful. So that's about the course. It's just for us to gain an understanding. Now, at the end of this training, which we are going to be doing every week. At the end, one can actually write Easy 104 exam certification, and such person will be able to earn Microsoft Azure Administrator certificate. That's after the learnings, because we are going to be doing a lot of deep dive, and the understanding and the learnings are enough for us to take certification exam for those of us that are interested in doing that. So let's start with today's agenda. Don't forget, if you have any question, this is something you can put down in the meeting chat, or you could, call my attention, because sometimes if I don't see um, the chat, you could call my attention to ask the question, or use the raise your hand. So yes, today's agenda will be focusing on configuring the Azure Active Directory. We're going to configure users and group accounts. Then there's a lab at the end of this. So basically, we're going to be looking at the administer identity introduction. That's what we will be doing here. Okay, so let's get started. Configure Azure Active Directory. So here we'll be doing a lot of describing what is Azure AD, the benefits, the features. I'm going to describe the Azure AD concept. We'll compare ADDS, which is the Active Directory, the Azure, sorry, ADDS to Azure AD. Okay, we are going to also talk about the different Azure AD editions that we have. We'll implement Azure AD device identity, implement service password reset, and that would take it up for today. Okay, so let's start with describe Azure Active Directory benefit and feature. Usually the first thing the question is, what is Azure AD? Okay, now I would say this is a cloud-based identity and access manager and access management services. Usually it helps IT administrators or employees in our organization to be able to gain access to resources. Okay, that's what this Azure AD does. It helps employees within the organization to gain access to resources. Now, if you see what we have uh, on the screen here, it's basically saying it will help you to secure and manage access into Azure services. So we have various Azure services, and there is a need, for us to be able to access maybe tools, or resources or a particular application or service. Now, the only way you can get to do that is through the Azure Active Directory. You will be able to, sign in with your credentials, okay, and gain access to these services. So it's a form of, having authentication, and authorization, if I can help us to understand it better that way. Now, who are the people that uses this Azure AD? It's important to mention. Um, so the Azure AD particularly is intended for our IT admins in our organization, because the IT admin is going to use this to control the apps within our services. Let's take, for instance, there's a particular application within the organization. So the IT admin can use the Azure AD to, control your access to it. It may, want to put security around it to say, okay, before you can access this particular application within the organization, there's a need for you to sign in with your, log in with your credentials, as well as even have, another layer of security, maybe by requiring MFA, the multi-factor authentication. So these are the way IT admins within our environment control the access one can have to application or other resources. Okay, so not only IT admins uses Azure AD, we also have app developers. The app developers are also, set of people that use this Azure AD, and basically they use it in adding maybe a single sign-on to a particular app that has been built. Okay, and what do I mean? Let's say we have a custom application that we've built within our organization for the benefits of our staff or our users. Now, this developer can decide, rather than signing up with a different credentials, the same, employee credentials that you have that you use in accessing a system, you can use that same credentials to access this new custom app that is intended for users or employees in the organization. So for that reason, the app developer can use this Azure AD to add SSO. SSO means single sign-on to the application. So you don't have to use a new set of credentials all over again. Instead, you just make use of the pre-existing credential that one have. Okay, then another set of people that uses this Azure AD are the SaaS subscribers. Now, if you take note, when I said IT admin makes use of it, is more or less like the EAS part. Yes, infrastructure as a service. When I say app developers uses is more or less, in the category of platform as a service. Now, the SaaS subscribers, those that are using Microsoft 365, Office 365, Dynamics, CRM, and whole. Now, these subscribers, because you are making use of these services, automatically you are using Azure AD. That's how it works automatically. Now, from what we can see here, the diagram, I'll just summarize with this diagram, letting us know that we have AD. We'll still talk about it, but just to give you an overview, AD has to do with on-premises. Okay, that's the Active Directory for on-premises. And we have the Azure AD, which is specifically for cloud. And these two have their different type of authentication. Now, when the AD or ADDS, as you may want to call it, and Azure AD comes together, when they are, you know, um, interoperability, or if they coexist, that's where the concept of hybrid comes along, and their authentication is also unique. Don't worry, we'll talk about that as we move on in this training. It's just to give you an idea of what this diagram is about. Okay, I don't know if we have any question here before I move on. Let me check the chat if there's question. Okay, so let's move on. Let's talk about the concept of Azure AD. Okay, so this here are, I would say, various terminologies, for the Azure AD. So we have the identity. Okay, identity in a layman's language. This is how you are able to, distinguish someone or a thing. So, how do you identify, or how do you recognize? Let me use that word. You know, this from this. How do I differentiate Tosin from Jude? It's based on our identity, and characteristics comes with that. So in essence, I would say identity can be A user, it can be um, a computer, it can be groups, they can be anything, but basically, the identity is what describe an object, and this object can get authenticated. So an object, a user could be an object. So that's just the concept in terms of terminology being used. So if you hear, oh, an object, the object could be a user, it could be a computer, it could be groups. Okay, so let's take the simplest one of talking about a user. How do I differentiate the different users in my environment? How do I differentiate my employees, in my environment? So it's based on their identity, and this can come with the form of their username and password. Do you know that in an organization you could have two persons bearing Tosin? One could be Tosin Anishere, the other one could be Tosin Animasham, or you could have two John. One can be John James, the other one can be John Johnson. If you look at these two people's initials, they have same initials. Now, when you are configuring such user in your environment, how do you identify the first person from the other? In fact, let's not take it far. There are some people who have the same name and surname. They are not related. I'm sure we've come across such people before in our walks of life. Now, if peradventure these two persons work in the same organization, how do we differentiate both of them? How are we able to, differentiate person A from B that both have the same name and surname? Now, this can be identified based on their identity. Okay, the same thing for what's called computers. You know, you could have the same set of device, the same devices and all. Now, how do you differentiate them from each other? Again, the identity is what we use to differentiate all of these objects. Again, they are all called objects. The next one here is account. Um, Account here is an identity that has a data that is associated with it. So in essence, there is no way you can have an account without an identity. Okay. So when we say, oh, log into your Azure account, I don't know if you're following me. If I say, oh, let everyone on this call go ahead to log into their Azure account, basically that means there is a form of identity, for this person to be able to log on to their account. So that's why you cannot have an account without an identity. In essence, the account is usually an identity that has data that is being associated to it. Jude has an account. Okay, now Jude here, we've been able to single out the identity for Jude and associated data to it, to have its own account. I don't know if you're following me. Please, if you have any question, do not hesitate to call my attention, because I may be going high level, different from the basics we did in Is and Azure. So there's a need for us to understand and be all carried along. So if you have any question, I will be happy to answer the question for us. So let's move on. The next one, we have the Azure Id accounts. Okay, the Azure Id account is basically um, an identity. Again, that's why it's important for us to understand what this identity is. An identity that is created through any Microsoft Cloud services or through an Azure AD. So what do I mean? You can have Azure AD account that is created through maybe an organization subscribed to Microsoft 365. Remember when I was telling us who are the people that use Azure AD? I said SaaS subscribers, those that are using the Dynamics CRM, Microsoft 365, even Azure itself. Now, this subscriber automatically, because they have subscribed to those services, automatically they are Azure AD users. Okay, so an identity that is created through these SaaS services, or Azure itself. you know uh, that is whereby you are able to access cloud uh, resources or cloud services. So these accounts can even come in form of, basically it's usually come in form of a work or school account. So in a layman's English, for us to aid a proper understanding, I could say the Azure AD account is usually, just simple English for us to understand, is usually an organization's account. I don't know if putting it that way makes more sense for us to understand. You know, that's, but not every time, because you could have a personal account too, but sometimes you could just refer to Azure AD account as a work or school account. Now we have the Azure AD tenants and subscription. Sorry, tenant and directory, I mean. Okay. Now for tenant and directory, this is just that instance of Azure AD, and is specifically created for organizations. So whenever an organization subscribe, or should I say sign up for a Microsoft services, automatically you have an instance of Azure AD that is created for this organization. Okay, that's can refer to that as a tenant. Let's take this example. We have, a company called Company ABC. Now, Company ABC wants to subscribe to cloud, specifically, let's say Microsoft 365 services. Now, Company ABC goes ahead to sign up for Microsoft 365. Now, as soon as the account is created, of course, no company ABC is going to provide information of before signing up. So they are going to provide the company name, the size of the company, and all of those. Now, that company name that is being provided at the end of the creation, that becomes the tenant. Now, because it's being created using Microsoft 365, it doesn't matter. Remember, I said automatically an instance of Azure AD is created. Now, let's leave M365 aside. Let's even come down to Azure itself. A company wants to subscribe to Azure services. Okay. Now, in the process of subscribing, you're going to sign up. That's what it means. You're trying to give a consent to say you want to use these services, and you want to register, to use these services. Okay. So, of course, you'll be providing your company details for such purpose. Okay. Now, in doing so, you have created a tenant. Now, how does this differentiate from an account? Because within the tenant, which is for the organization, you're going to have users, and each of these users are going to have an account. I don't know if that makes sense to us. Okay, so one thing I also want us to know is that sometimes you can interchange it. You may hear people say, "Oh, log into your organization's tenants or company tenant, or log into your company's directory." These things are usually used interchangeably sometimes. Okay. The last but not the least, Azure subscription. Azure subscription. Now, the subscription particularly is what you use to pay for Azure cloud services. Remember when we're treating AZ900, and we talked about, the different services, within Azure, the compute services, the app services, and so on and so forth. Now, these are different services that you could have access to based on subscription. Okay, I don't know if some of us have, observed. I believe, if not all of us on this call, when we try to log into portal.azure.com, which is the Azure portal, of course, if we have an account, yes, we will be able to successfully log in. But when it comes to using services like, let's say, creating VM, or creating Azure storage, and all of those services. If you do not have a subscription in place, you may not be able to do that. What that means is your subscription is what enables you to pay for the services that you want to use, or the services that you are meaning to have. And most of the time, subscriptions are usually linked to, maybe credit card that is provided. So these are the Azure AD concepts that are important for us to know. I don't know if we have any question before I move on. Let me check the chat. Okay, so let's move on. All right, now next year we have comparing ADDS to AAD. Now ADDS basically is the concept of on-premises, while AAD is associated to cloud. So ADDS is acronym for Active Directory Domain Services. Active Directory Domain Services, while AAD, as we know, is Azure Active Directory. Now, one particularly is associated to our traditional on-premises that we are familiar with. Okay, that's the ADDS. Again, the other one is mainly cloud. Okay, now that's one unique difference in a very fast way that you can remember. Now the ADDS, which I say is traditional on-premises deployment, is basically a Windows Server based Active Directory, and this is usually deployed on a physical server. Although yes, it can also be deployed on a virtual machine, yes, but the concept is deployed on a server. Okay, and that is something we consider to be our primary directory services. Okay, so the idea of this ADDS is that it will include other domain services, or should I say Active Directory services, the likes of ADCS that has to do with certificate services, the likes of ADLDS that has to do with lightweight directory services, the likes of ADRMS that has to do with the right management services, then the popular ADFS that has to do with federation services. So this ADDS, comes alongside with all the other AD services, and again, it's being deployed on a server. Okay, and here it says the Azure AD is primarily an identity solution. Okay, and is designed for HTTP and HTTPS communication. This is called hypertext transfer protocol, and the HTTPS there is the hypertext transfer protocol secure. So that's what this Azure AD uses. So that's their, should I call it, internet based application. Primarily the identity solution here for Azure AD is designed for internet based application. Remember that even the cloud itself, when we're talking about the concept of cloud, we said for cloud computer, we can access resources via internet. So that's why the HTTP, HTTPS, uh, they are internet-based application. Now, another thing is using the REST API query. Okay, now because we understand that the identity solution of the Azure AD, which is identity solution, uses this HTTP, HTTPS, and it cannot be queried through LDAP. LDAP basically is a communication within on-premises. So for what I'm saying in essence is our on-premises ADDS uses LDAP. Okay, and our Azure AD uses the REST API over the HTTP and HTTPS. Okay, so also in terms of communication protocol, um, our on-premises, for those of us that are familiar with on-premises, remember this is an intermediate course. It uses different on-premises uses authentication like Kerberos, authentication and Noble. Specifically when it comes to Azure AD, the authentication is different. It uses the likes of SAML, that we have WS Federation. It uses OpenID Connect, for its authentication now, or we can even say the OAuth for authorization. So those are its own communication protocol. And regarding federation services, just like our ADDS on premises. Also, AD uses federation service, and the essence of that federation service is so that third-party services can be included. We can have third-party services like Facebook, Google, and so on and so forth. Now, another unique thing or unique differentiator of the ADDS from Azure AD is the structure. On premises there is a form of hierarchical structure, okay, and our Azure AD uses flat structure. I really don't want to be confusing us, but there's a need for us to have an understanding of the on premises, and that's the only way we can follow. And what do I mean by this hierarchical structure? There's structure of the forests, the sites, the domains, down to organization OU, that's organizational unit, we refer to it as OU, down to object itself. So those are hierarchical. But for Azure AD, it's just a flat structure. There's nothing like, oh, we having OUs or having um GPOs, that's a group policy object, and also it doesn't work that way. That's a unique differentiator of the ADDS and Azure AD. I don't know if we have any question here before I move on. Okay, good. So let's move on. Let's talk about the Azure Active Directory editions. So basically, I would say these editions, in a simple word, is talking about licenses. I'll just put it that way, licenses. So when you hear, oh, Azure AD has editions or comes in different editions, I'm basically saying Azure AD comes with different licenses. That's a simple way for us to remember. But of course, we refer to it as editions. And of course, our AAD comes with 4 different editions, just like we can see in the tabulated format here. So we have the free, and that's why when we subscribe to the Azure portal, there's this without subscription, even though that's for those of us that have the free subscription that comes with it and all. Now that free gives us access to be able to create users and groups. That those users and group are what we call directory objects. So users, group, computers, we refer to them as directory objects. Okay. Now it also gives us room to have unlimited single sign-on. Okay, you get the core identity. You do not have access to core identity and access, neither do you have access to business collaboration. We're still going to talk about that in the course of our training. Call it B2b. So there is B2C, there is B2b. We'll learn more about that. Our focus right now is on the 4 different editions. Now, those are what free gives us access to. Now, should you have Microsoft 365, license, remember when you subscribe to Microsoft 365, an instance of Azure AD is automatically created. Now, this is saying that, okay, fine, it's not like, okay, I'm creating Azure AD tenant. What I have is Microsoft 365 tenants. And within my Microsoft 365 tenant, I have Microsoft 365 license, should I say app. Now, of course, within that, you also have unlimited directory object, which means you can create as many users and groups and computers as possible. We refer to them again as objects. Also, we have unlimited single sign-on, but based on other services, you do not have access to them, and you can only have access to them maybe when you know, upscale, um, go up your services. Now, the next one here within Azure is the Azure AD P1. So Premium 1 or Premium P1, however you want to call it. Also, you have unlimited directory object creation or uh, creation. You have unlimited single sign-on and um, okay, sorry, I think I'm mixing it up. You have access to, sorry, please. For the free, you have access to the core identity access and B2b. Pardon my error. You have access to identity and B2b, but you do not have access to the rest of the features within Azure AD. Now, for Microsoft 365, you also have access to core identity and access, the B2b collaboration, identity and access for 365, but you do not have access to the rest of the Azure feature. Now, if you have P1, which means you gain more services, that's what it means. You have um, no limits, that is unlimited access to the directory objects, creating users, groups, computers, and all of those. Then for single sign-on, it's also unlimited in terms of maybe app creation and or applications that you have within your environment. Then you have access to the core identity and access management. You have the feature of B2b collaboration where you can invite users from outside your organization, that is users outside your tenants. Let's assume you and I work in ABC company and we are meaning to have collaboration with users from XYZ company. Now, with this B2B, we can invite guests into our environment to have collaboration. So it gives room for that. It gives room for identity and access for Office 365. Also, you have the premium features, you have hybrid identity, which means you can have the coexistence of on-premises and cloud. We'll talk about that in the course of this training. We have the advanced group access, we have conditional access in terms of security. That's one of the Azure AD features that we have, but you do not have access to the identity protection as well as identity governance. So yes, P1 it's cheaper than P2, but you still do not have access to all the services. But P2 in terms of hierarchy gives you all. So you have what is contained in free, what is contained in P1, and even more. That's the idea behind P2. You have more access to things around conditional access for your app, privilege identity management. Maybe you want to use it to restrict and monitor admin access and all of those. So you have more of that. So depending on what the architecture of your environment, it determines what license or what edition is required of you. So without any of this addition, depending on what you want to do, or depending on your business requirement, you may not be able to do certain things. And of course, these are the Azure Active Directory editions that we have. So don't forget that the P1, P2 is, should I say, in terms of pricing, is higher than the rest of it. Between you and I know usually the enterprise organizations, that's organizations that I'll call them large organizations because of their architecture on environment and the services they handle or they have. They mostly have this P2 in place. Okay, and some organization based on costs or price and all of it can just do it. Okay, we don't have much, we are concentrating on this and that, and some organization just get a blend of okay, P1 P2 that is being given to users according to what they need, what they need to do in the environment. So that's regarding the Azure Active Directory editions. I don't know if we have any questions before I move on. Let me check the chat again. Okay, no question. Let's move on. Please feel free to ask question. It's very important. That's how I will know if you're following or if there's anything you need me to clarify. So moving on, let's talk about configuring Azure AD device identity. Okay. Again, remember in the beginning we said the Azure AD enables single sign-on. And of course, it enables single sign-on on devices, it enables single sign-on on apps, and even services. You know, it doesn't matter where you are. This is where the IT administrator come in, and they are the ones that uses this Azure AD to ensure, all of this happens. Whenever you join an organization, okay, you are being given an asset or you are being given devices. You join company ABC today, and of course, they give you tools that are required for you to work. Tools like it could be a desktop, it could be a laptop, it could be mobile phone, it could be anything. I'm calling all of these things devices. That tools that are required for you to get work done and for you to be able to get your work done or use this thing, you need to be able to access, the services. So you're accessing, let's say, the Azure AD using your laptop. So the laptop here is a device. So now the different device identities that we have, like how do we identify or how do we differentiate this particular device from that device is what we want to talk about. Okay, so we have the Azure AD registered devices, we have the Azure AD joined devices, and we have the hybrid Azure AD joined devices. Now, organizations takes care of their assets. Now, these devices are assets and they are listed also on the Azure AD. Let me say that again. Users users, we have users that are created or listed within the Azure AD. So not only users, we also have devices. Now these devices could be computer, laptop, desktop, phones, servers, and so on and so forth. Now these are devices that are listed on the Azure AD. Now how do we differentiate or identify these devices? They are based on the device identities. So let me start with the Azure AD register. Now, for the Azure AD register, that has to do with, you know, um, bringing your own devices. So basically, they are not the organization's, let me say, resources. Take, for instance, you have your own personal mobile phone, bought it with your money, it's for you, but then you want to have the company's email, or you want to have access to the Teams on your phone, for easy access and all of it, or you want to have that easy access to your company's email. Now, what that means is you can bring your own personal device such that it is registered to the company's Azure AD. And there's a reason for that. Not because the organization wants to, monitor all your personal activity on the phone and all. It's just so that they can have, that data of where the users are connected from, and should in case for security reasons, should in case maybe the device is stolen and all, just to not to put the organization at risk. These devices, which are usually managed with Intune, can be wiped off. And no, that's just one reason. So we refer to such devices again as what's it called? Azure Id Register devices. Now, this is not limited to phone. It could even be your personal laptop, and you want to access the company's data from your personal laptop. Do not forget that when we talk about cloud, we said some of the benefit or the advantages that we can access from anywhere on any device. Now, this device is not compulsory, it's the organization that is giving you that device. It could be your own personal device, like you're currently on leave and there's a need for you to send mail, or there's just something important that you need to do while you're on leave and you do not have your system with you. I'm just saying, okay, you could have your own personal computer, and through the web browser you could quickly gain access to maybe your email, your work email, or Teams, such thing. But in that instance, the device sometimes needs to be registered. So depending on how the companies have configured it, that okay, you must register the device. But that's the idea of how it is. And again, these devices can be controlled using Microsoft Intune. I said that earlier on. So there's something called within Intune, we have MAM, you know, and MDM. MDM is mobile device management, and MAM is mobile application management. So because this time around we're focusing on device, so the MDM is what manages this registration within Intune. And of course, when it comes to the types of devices, it could be the Windows Windows 10, the iOS, Android, as well as Mac OS. So that's about registered device. So one take home here for Azure AD registered device is that it has to do with bring your own devices. Now let's move to the Azure AD joined device. Now for the Azure AD joined, particularly those are usually um, organizations devices. They are owned by your organization. Okay. It's usually okay, you join a company and they give you these resources, laptop, it could be a desktop, it could be a mobile phone, and all of it, but it's not owned by you, it's owned by the organization. Okay, so the Azure AD join basically is just designed to provide access to both organizations have and resources, and just to simplify when it comes to Windows deployment. It simplifies Windows deployment. Now this also has its own benefit, because with organizations devices, you could have SSO, so there will be no need for any special what's it called, credentials, in terms of for authentication process. You use the same credentials all through for both your apps, your devices, and any other services within the environment. Okay, then it allows this roaming. What do I mean by roaming? You can work from anywhere or any site, and this just reduce the time to start configuring a new device when you get to another location. Take for instance, you're working in the UK, okay, and you need to go to the US or something. Let's even assume your organization have another what's it called, sites in the US. Now, rather than when you get to the US, they give you a new device entirely or configure a new device for you to work, your same device you have while working in the UK, can still be used in the US. So it saves that time, or should I say, it reduces that time to start configuring new device. And of course, you have access to Microsoft Store for Business, Windows Hello, and so on and so forth. So again, in terms of OS, I would say Windows 10 and above devices. So which means Windows 10, Windows 11, and so on and so forth. Those are the kind of devices that we could have for Azure AD joined devices. Now, the last but not the least, we have the Azure AD Azure AD joined, hybrid Azure AD joined devices. Now, for the hybrid Azure AD join, it has to do with, I say, I'm trying to see how I can make it very simple. You have devices that are joined to both on-premises and the cloud, which means within on premises, you can use the group policy to manage the devices, as well as on the cloud. It can also be managed on the cloud. So in a situation whereby you have existing um, image within the on premises and you are, maybe deploying an hybrid environment. Now, this is supported. The hybrid Azure AD joint devices is supported. That is, these are devices that were used on premises, and now because of the hybrid deployment, and now present on the cloud. So which means it can be managed both ways, on premises and cloud. And of course, these devices are usually Windows 7 and above. So it can be as low as Windows 7 and above, unlike the Azure AD Joint that is just strictly Windows 10 devices and above. So that's about the hybrid Azure AD Joint. I don't know if we have any question before we move, you know, to the next topic. Any question, please? Okay, so no question. Let's move on. Please don't forget, if you have any question in mind, try to drop it in the chat environment, okay? Or you could call my attention to ask your question. Moving on to implement self-service password resets. Now, this is another very interesting topic. From the word, from the name, self-service password resets. What that tells us is, excuse me, you you can, reset your own password without the help of IT admins or without the help of help desks. No, gone are those days when we have issues with our account regarding password that we have to start raising tickets to help desks to help us in resetting the password or resetting the account, and passwords specifically. Now, you do not need that with the SSPR service. So it's a feature within the Azure AD. And this feature just enables users within the tenants or users within the environment to be able to set their own password or change their own password, or do things around their own password. Let me just put it that way. That's why it's called self-service. You are helping yourself regarding your own password. Okay, so especially in terms of the COVID that occurs. So just imagine, for instance, the COVID that happened years back and all, where users of different organizations have to work from home. So imagine if you have password issue. Now you have to wait for help desk. It's really something that would waste your time. There's an overhead cost and all of those. But with self-service password reset, that is really simplified. Don't worry, I'm going to take us through the labs and you would understand all of these things. So this password self-service password reset, um you can change your own password, you can reset your password in case you forget. I forgot my password and I need to reset it, or I have a feeling my password has been compromised, I need to change it. So for those reasons, you can use self-service password resets. And in doing this, which I will show us in the lab, we have various authentication method. Okay, after registering, or enrolling oneself for self-service password. So most of the time, the IT admins are the one that would enroll their users to say, okay, I want all the users in my organization to be able to reset their own password. Or it could be like, oh, I want specific users in a particular department to have that right to reset their own password. Others, let them still make that helpdesk. It just depends on the organization's how the organization is configured or the business requirement for it. And all. So the authentication methods, there are different methods available, whether you want to reset using email or phone or, secret questions and answers to question and all. So when you're registering for SSPL, one thing is certain, it is something that you have to, the same process that you register for multi-factor authentication, that's the same process you register for SSPL, and I will show us when we get to the lab session. So I don't know if we have any question regarding that. Okay, so if there are no questions, which I would really implore us to have questions. Any question, please? I think I should pause here because we finished a particular topic. Any question on what we have talked about so far? So far, let me tell us what we've talked about. We have talked about the Azure Active Directory. We talked about the benefits and the features of this Azure Active Directory. We looked at the concept of Azure AD, the terminologies. We also compared the traditional on-premises ADDS to Azure AD. We looked at the different directory editions, which are likened to licenses. We looked at the devices identities, you know, and we also looked at the self-service password reset. So those are the things, we talked about under configure Azure Active Directory. So please, do we have any question? Okay. I want to believe that is well understood, and I'll take your silence as no question for now. Again, please, if you do not want to come off your mic to your mute and ask question, it's okay. Just please drop the question in the chat and it will be answered. Let's move on to configuring users and group accounts. And here we are going to look at, okay, how do we create users accounts? How do we manage users accounts? When it comes to creating bulk accounts, maybe we have 1,000 users that we want to create. Is this something we create, one after the other till we get to the, 1,000 person? And no, we're going to be looking at that. We'll talk about how do we assign licenses to these different users and group. We'll look at creating administrative units. And of course, there's the lab at the end of that. So we'll do all of this, and I'll also take us through the lab environment. So let's start. Users, creating user accounts. So I think here I'll do more of demo, than just, speaking to us offhand. But of course, just to understand, we have 3 ways in which we can create user accounts for our Azure AD. Now, we can create the user account based on cloud identities. So what do I mean by that? You have your Azure AD. Now you create users in your Azure AD. Now these users um, created here, we call them cloud only users. So creating users on your Azure AD or your M365 or your Dynamics CRM or other SaaS application, that's a way of creating users. Okay, and now these users that are created on the cloud, we call them cloud only users or cloud identities. Now I'm able to identify them to say, okay, these are users created on the cloud. Okay, then we have the directory synchronized identities. Now these are users that originally they exist on premises. Okay, and because of our hybrid deployment, they are being, synchronized to the cloud. Now, how do you identify these users? It's based on their identity again. And finally, we have the guest user. Now, these are users that are not part of our own organization. We are in organization ABC. Those users are from XYZ. They are not with us, but because we have invited them into our own directory, it makes them a guest user. Now let me illustrate with this. Permit me to see if I can bring up my whiteboard. So I can illustrate it much better. 1 minute, please. Just bringing up my whiteboard. Okay. So I have, let's represent this as cloud. Okay, sorry. Now let me use blue for cloud. Or let me use the Azure color. Okay, so let me use this to represent cloud. Even though it's not the pure blue. Then this to represent the AD. And this, let me use it to represent the guests. So now this is my cloud, right? Now this could be any of the what's it called, SaaS application or the Azure AD itself. Now I create a user. I create user 1, I create user 2, I create user 3. Now all of these users that I created, how do I identify them? They are called cloud identity user or cloud only users. Why? Because they are created on the cloud. Now this triangle here represents on premises. I'll just call it on prem. Now I create users on premises. I can call this user A, user B, user C. Don't forget they are created on premises. Now there was a directory synchronization between the on-premises and cloud, which makes it hybrid. Now, because there is now this hybrid implementation, okay, now users that are on-premises are now synchronized to the cloud. So what that means in essence is that user A is now going to be part of the cloud, user B is going to be part of cloud, user C is going to be part of the cloud. So they will exist both on premises as well as, let me do this. They will exist both on premises as well as on the cloud. But how do you identify these users? Because these users are actually from on premises and on the cloud, you are able to identify them as directory synchronized identity. And that's another way of creating users. Now, finally, we have the guest user. So let's call this guest user 1, G1, guest user 2, guest user 3. Now, don't forget, this particular guests, they are not in our organization. Okay, they're outsiders, if I can put it that way. In fact, let me demarcate them. Guests here, they're outsiders. Now, because we have invited the guests into our environment, let's say we are inviting just oops, please sorry about that. I'm using the freehand tool. Okay, so let's assume I'm inviting guest user 1 and just guest user 2. Now, these people, these users rather, will be listed as part of my Active Directory users. But how do I know they are not part of, how do I know, how do I identify them? I'm identifying them as guests because of their type of identity. And that's another way you could create users. So that's just, to give us an explanation. Now, let me bring up my environment if I have that up already. 1 minute, please. I want to sign into my accounts so that I can just show us enough of the talking, and I can just, show us the lab while. 1 minute. I'm trying to authenticate into my environment. Okay. Please just give me a minute. I'm trying to sign in. I think I'm having issue signing in with this one. Let me bring up another account. 1 minute. One minute, please. I'm just trying to bring up my account. It's taking a while for me to receive code for authentication. So let me just bring this up so you can see. So I'm trying to bring up, I'm waiting for the code. This is taking a while. Okay, so while I'm waiting for the code to come in, please let's move on. But I wanted to show us, okay, how users are created. Okay, let me see if I can have 1 minute. One minute, please. Okay. I don't know why this is taking a while, but just give me a little while because it will make sense for me to show you rather than just talking all through. Okay, I think I have one code here for another account of mine. Okay, good. I think I have this one right here. Let's see this. Okay. Is my system hanging? Uh-oh. this. All right, great. So yeah, let's get started. So this is my Azure portal, and this is not happening. My system is actually hanging. Apologies, please. Maybe I should stop sharing, then I share again. Please. Let me stop sharing, then I will share my screen again. Please let me know once you're able to see my screen. Oh, great. So yes, I'm resharing my screen again. I know. Can do a thumbs up or just unmute to say to let me know once you're able to see my screen. All right, so let's move on. Now here within my Azure portal, I'm in the Azure Active Directory of my Azure portal. So I'm going to users. Now these are the users that I have within my environment. Now all of these users here, you can see the user type. So basically all these users here are, I would say, cloud only users. And that's why if you see here, it's saying on-premises sync enabled, like they are not users from on-premises that were synced to the cloud. Now, how do we create user? It's as simple as clicking on new users, create new user, and you can see here, do we want to create users or want to invite users? Now, if you are inviting a user into the environment, this is where the guests, user coming from, and you can invite them using the B2b collaboration. Okay, but right now, I just want to show us how to create users. So username, can give it a username, any name in mind. Jane. Hope I don't have that name already. Okay, so now the uniquetraining.net is my own organization domain. Okay, so now what's this username? I can say Jane Davis. Now, of course, first name Jane, last name Davis, and create password. So you can either allow auto generate password, or you can decide let me create password. Okay, so I can say, okay, let me create the password. Sorry, I'm not sure what I typed here. So I've created the password, and now within this place is asking, do you want to include Jane to be part of a group, or the role is just okay user? So it depends. If you want to make Jane to be a part of a group automatically during creation, this can be done. Okay, then do you want to block signing or allow signing and all? So there may be a situation whereby after you've created a user and user reports that the account has been compromised, maybe the user is on leave and is noticing some things about the account, the user can report, and an admin can decide to block that user's account in the meantime. So there are so many reasons why the account can be blocked. So this is where you block the account. Now you can have usage location to restrict where your user is signing in from. This is also possible. Now, depending on the user's roles, that's the job role and title or department, this can also be set. So I can decide Jane here is is an IT, or should I say Exchange admin. So department is in the IT department, and the company name is Unique Training. Sorry. Okay, so you could, select one of the users to be Jane's manager and also these are where you do all of those and you create. So you can see here, Jane Davis has been created. So you can click on the notification. It should give you the notification of successfully created user Jane Davis. So where's Jane here? You could refresh. Sometimes you can see Jane here. Okay. So this is where we have Jane. Now, if you notice, the format of my creation is I only use the first name, and all for most of it. Clark at Ben at Jane at and all. So these are just, my own way. So some organizations prefers to use first name dot last name or initial of first name and last name or first name and initial of last name. Depending on the organization, you can have that format. But that's a very simple way of creating users. And of course, we know how users are created. Now let's try to invite guests. So let me see if I can invite myself as a guest. So new user, create new user, or sorry, I should have just said invite user. So here I want to invite user. Let me see. Um, so email address. Okay, first name, last name, and personal message. Just put something simple. All right, so now, in case you need to put TOSI as part of a group, so most of our organizations do that when they have guests in their environment, for their best practices, they put them in a group such that they can manage the guest users within their environment and, have control in terms of their access management, what they can access and restrict what they can do within the environment. So for such reason, some organization prefer to put their users in a group. So you want to block signing, allow sign, just similar to the first and hold, then you can invite user. So to say here, inviting our user successfully invited. So let me see, check my mail if I have invite already. This may take a while, this may take some time, but that's exactly how it is done. Okay, so let me see if I can bring up my mail. And if you see here, it's saying Microsoft Invites. Now, this is what it looks like. Okay, please, this, and all. You can see you are invited for collaboration. What I did put in place. Now, if you accept this invitation, it will be sent to this. It will be sent to this. So let me accept invitation. So to tell me send code. So we need to enter that code. Let's see if that code has been sent. I can refresh. 1 minute. Still waiting for the code. Okay, yes, the code has been sent. And let's sign in. So I click I accept. Next. Okay, so I need to, this is me trying to set up an account and all of it. Now let's get back here and see if, so now can you see the difference? To say and share here now is showing you that my user type is a guest. I wasn't created directly as a cloud only user in this Azure AD. Instead, I was invited from another organization. Now, what gives room for this is the B2b feature. The business to business collaboration feature is what enabled me to be able to be part of this Active Directory. And you can see here that my identity is showing it as a mail rather than a particular tenant and all. So in case I have another tenant and all, it's just going to give me the invitation. If you see, the creation type is based on invitation. So that's just to let us know. Now, managing user accounts. Of course, I'm not going to be wasting much of our time here because we've actually um, talked about it. We can see that, okay, within our portal, we can create users and we can manage user where we provide, contact info, and all of this. Now, one thing I would like us to know is that we can delete users from our account, and when we delete this user, we can restore it back within 30 days. Now, anything beyond 30 days, the user account will be permanently deleted. Okay. And also we can sign in and do audit log for all of this. So as we move on in the course of this training, we'll see more of this. So I've showed us this. Let's move on. Performing bulk accounts updates. So we can actually have a bulk account. So rather than creating user one by one, just like I have created, Jane Davis, and how we can also have bulk account. And how do we do that? We come here, we can do bulk creates. Now, usually the way it works for bulk creates is there's a CSV template, like an Excel sheet, right? Now, let's download so that you can see it for yourself. Now, it looks exactly like this, where you can update, all of these. So, for instance, you have to put the name, the initial of what you want the name to look like, the password, if you want the sign-in block, yes or no, the first name, last name, job title, department, all of those things that we are supposed to do, manually and all. First of all, it can be updated in the CSV. So imagine you're recruiting and you're trying to recruit users in your organization. Now they pass through the recruiters, the HR, and all of it. Now, usually the information is being passed maybe from HR to IT, and IT will configure this user. So what I'm trying to say is that usually IT will not configure users manually, like one after the other, especially if they have more than one users that needs to be, added or created on the Azure AD. So with this bulk upload, it can be done. You do it in this CSV format, populate all of this, and once it's populated, you can now upload the CSV, and that's all. Okay, so that's how the bulk users work. Okay, there's always that naming convention, the way you want your username to be displayed. Like I said, some organization use name dot surname at the domain suffix. Some usually use maybe the initial or first name alongside the last name. It just depends. So there are all of these things to be considered. The type of password and all. There's usually convention and all. So once you are able to meet that, then you can upload this CSV file and it will automatically populate this. And I think I'm going to give us this as an assignment pending our next training, which will be next week Saturday. So I want to see, us. I want to see that you populating a bulk user within your own portal, within your own environment. So that would be like a lab exercise that will give to us. So let's move on. Creating group accounts. Creating group accounts, just the same way we create user, similarly, we can also create group accounts. So let's get back here, close. I'm sorry, Active Directory. So within our Azure Active Directory, these are all the things we have access to and we can manage. We can create users and manage users. We can create groups. We can have external identities. We'll come back to that in the course of the training. We have, let me show you. So it's external identities. We can have roles and administrator. Some of these users we created. If we want to give them an admin role, we have administrative unit, enterprise application. Should in case you want to integrate maybe your own application within Azure AD. We have devices. Remember when we were talking about the different devices of the Azure AD Join, the Azure Id Register, the hybrid Azure Id Join, and we said, these things can be managed via Intune, and also we have all of those. Now we have the app registration, identity, and so on and so forth. We have all of that in here. But our focus right now is groups and how we can create groups. Now these are all the groups I have within my test environment. I call this my own, test environment for playing things around and all. And you will notice there that the source are basically from cloud, which means I created all this group from the cloud. I do not have any, group that were synchronized from on-premises to cloud, which is something I'll be willing to show us maybe when we get to a particular topic. Maybe when we're treating Azure Id Connect, would show us how this synchronization is done. Okay, so let's create a new group. So we have different types of group. We have the security group and the Microsoft 365 group, and I'll tell us the difference or what each of them does. Now, the security groups basically are used to manage, the members, whether it's the users or computers and all of it, such that you're able to add permission, give permission to those users. So I have a group. I call that group one, and I'm saying that anybody, any users or any object within group one should have access to Office 365. So in a way, that group as I'm able to give permission to all the users within that group to have access to Office 365. No, so we can say creating this group is going to give us a way to apply permission to its members at once. So rather than saying, okay, let me have permission to Tosin separately, to Tanya separately, to Chris separately, I can put all of these people in a group and assign permission to that group. Okay, so this is what I am saying in essence. Permit me to just illustrate to aid our understanding. I know we have less than 15 minutes for this class to be over. Well, hopefully we would be able to, complete the training. So here I have this group. So this is my group. Now within this group, I can have different users. Or let me not even represent it with that. Let me represent it with, okay, within this group, group X, I have user one, I have user A, and I have guest user 1. Now these are these users are member of group X. Now rather than individually applying permissions to user 1, user A, and guest user 1, I can put all of them in a group and apply permission to just this group. Permission. Please pardon my free writing. Oops. Okay, so I can just apply permission to this group to say users that are members of this group can have access to resource A or resource B, depending on what I want them to have access to. So that's what security about. Now for M365 group, basically that one provides collaboration. Okay, collaboration by giving the members of that group maybe access to shared mailbox, access to SharePoint sites, access to Teams, access to calendar and all of those. So we can, even people that are outside the organization can be a member of this group and have such access. So that's what M365 is about, collaboration. But for this demonstration, I'm going to choose security. Now, group name, let's say textilers, um, textilers group. That's my group name. Description, the intermediate class. Okay, so the Azure AD roles can also be assigned to group. So if we want that, all we have to do is yes, and but in this instance, I'll take it a step at a time. Although we are still going to build on all of this, foundation that we have started now, I would say no. Then the membership type. So we have, membership types when it comes to group. When we say assigned, specifically, that has to do with adding specific users to become a member of the group, such that that particular user you have added has a unique permission. That's for assigned. Now for dynamic user, now this usually make use of rules. And what do I mean by rules? So there's usually a rules that will make user be a part of a group. Let me explain. Maybe there's a rule in place that says every user that is in the marketing department should be a part of group one, should be a member of group one. Now, once I create a user and I establish that that user is marketing department, now automatically that user, because of that clause of any user for marketing department, that's my rule, okay, is going to be a member of that group. So that's what we call dynamic user. So let's take, for instance, Jude joins an organization and there's already a rule in place that says user that market that are in marketing department will automatically be a member of maybe advertising group, just saying. Now Jude joins this organization and Jude is in the marketing department. Now automatically, because Jude has been created as part of the users within that tenant, automatically is going to be a part of the marketing department advertising group. Now if tomorrow, in the course of Jude being in the organization, maybe after some months, Jude decide to change department to say, okay, from marketing, I am moving to IT, just saying. Okay. Now, what happened is, because of that rule is no longer satisfied, Jude is no longer in marketing department. Right now, Jude is in IT. Automatically, Jude is no longer a member of that advertising group. That is the way dynamic user works. Okay. So that's for dynamic user. And we have the dynamic device. No. Now, this, I would say it works with security group only. It's not going to work with, okay, Microsoft 365 group, just security group only. And basically, it's also it makes use of rules to automatically add and remove device. The dynamic user has to do with users. The dynamic device has to do with devices. Okay, so if it meets the requirements, yes, it will add to that group. And if it doesn't meet the requirement, it's being removed from that group. So those are the types of membership. So for the purpose of our learning, I'm going to leave it as assigned. Now, the group could have owner, and I can, if I click here, I can say, okay, who is the owner of this group? I can say, okay, let John Smith be the owner of this group, and members. So I can assign members to the group. I can say, okay, Jane Davis, which I just created today, can be a member of the group, and even the guest user. Let's see if I can find the guest user that I created. Let's search. So this is a guest user. Can also be a member of this group, and I'll go ahead to create. Now this is going to create. Let's refresh, and now you can see here that I have my, group being created. So what name did I give this group again? Now I've refreshed. I've forgotten the name I gave it, but I know I gave it a name. Maybe Textilers, I guess. So I still need to refresh. Yes, Textilers group. So you can see here, it's a security group, and the membership type is assigned. It's not dynamic. So that's how to create a group. And of course, I've talked about the type, Microsoft's group, Microsoft's 365 group and security group. And also I have talked about the assignment type. Now let's move on to assign license to users and group. Okay, when it comes to licensing, we need to, we can assign. Remember the 4 editions we talked about? We have free, we have Microsoft 365, we have Azure AD P1, we have Azure AD P2. Those are the 4 editions that we have. But then we can always, based on the functionality that we want to give our user, we can assign licenses to this user. Now, how do I do that? I'm not sure if this particular, tenant will help me do that, but let's go ahead. I'm sorry. Let me just go to Azure AD. Okay, so users. So let's choose, still loading. So let's say Jane Davis. Okay, so this is Jane Davis user account, right? Now let's go to licenses because we want to assign license to Jane Davis. So right now, Jane Davis doesn't have any license. So we can click on assignment. So we can decide, okay, what license do we want to give Jane Davis? Do we want to give Jane Davis Microsoft 365 a license? Basically, this is what Jane Davis is going to have access to. So you can modify to say, to choose what you want Jane Davis to have access to. Or you can decide, I just want to give the Power App Plan 2 to Jane Davis, whereby you'll be able to have access to Flow, Common Data Service, Power Apps, Dryer, Free Flow. Or you can decide, okay, it's Power Automates or Power Pages. Now, depending on the license you want to assign, you can give this to, Jane Davis. So let's go ahead to say, okay, we just want to give Jane Davis the Microsoft Power App license. So we can do save. Okay, all right, so you can see here that license assignment failed for user. Okay, let me try this. Okay, it's the same thing. Now, me as an admin, I also do not have, this license in place for me to be able to assign license. So now, based on my rule, I am unable to do that. That was why I was trying to get the other test account, which I did not get the code I had. Now, when it comes to licensing, another thing I'd like us to notice, one can inherit license. Okay, there can be licenses can be inherited. And what do I mean? In place of group based, maybe I created a group and I assign license to that particular group. Now, any user that I members of that group can automatically inherit license or from that group. I think my time is almost up, and just you know permit me to quickly move on to the next thing. So this has to do with administrative unit, and I think this is the last slide for today, if I'm not mistaken. Now, for administrative unit, the usefulness is that we can use it to restrict administrative scope, by using this our administrative unit within the organization. So let's take, for instance, we have this university, and of course, this university has different, we call it faculty in Nigeria, right? Like, maybe faculty of science, faculty of engineering, faculty of education, and so on and so forth. Now, the school has that faculty. Now, this school can have, IT admins that can control access, manage users, and all for these different faculties. So, in essence, I'm saying one can create a role with administrative permission for AD user within that administrative unit. To say, let's say, faculty of science only. Or we can just say, okay, faculty of engineering. You can just restrict it to that, administrative units only. So that's another thing that we can use. And of course, one can manage this using the Azure Portal, which I promise I'm going to, do this demo next week. In fact, that's what I'll start with. Do demo next week before we move on to other things, since our time um, is fast spent. Okay, and I do not want to take further of our time. But remember, before you can create administrative unit, there is a need for us to have the Azure AD Premium 1 or Premium 2 license, because without that license, we would not be able to create this. And of course, we need to be a global admin, to be able to create this permission. So those are important things that we need to know. Okay, so this demonstration, we've explored user accounts, explore group account, but I have not been able to show us how to do so on PowerShell. So starting next week, in our next class, before we move to the next topic, okay, we will do that. So I don't know if we have any question, as we have successfully come to the end of this training. So basically what we've done today is to complete our module 1, administer identity. That's the module 1 we've just completed for our AZ-104. So I don't know if we have any question, as we have come to the end of the training. Any question, please? Any question? Okay, in the
No question. We'll just go and digest it, and then maybe I might have questions in the next session.
all right, great. That also makes sense. Like I said, we have completed module 1. So in the course of the next training, I know we started late today because we're waiting for people to join. So we started like about 15 to 16 minutes late, our usual time. So next week we'll start by 10 a.m. Please, let's endeavor to be here early so that we can start with the lab. We would demonstrate, these things that we've done, and even the assignment I gave us in terms of bulk upload, we can also try that. Just spend time. We'll make it more interactive rather than me just talking. I think that's the way we can learn. Having an interactive session where people can, ask questions, come up and, tell us what they've done. Now, if it fails, it's not a problem. That's the purpose of learning. We'll try it again in class. We can get that done together. So Thank you all for your time. It's a pleasure always being in your midst. For the labs, I'll put the lab guide within our files on the team sites, okay, where we can have access to the step-by-step lab and also the curriculum so that we can know ahead what we'll be treating next. And so thank you very much for your time and see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you,
weekend.
Tosi. Have
Thank
a good
you.
weekend, everyone.
And
Bye
you too. Thank you. Bye.
bye.